right. Okay, all right. The date, November 15th, 1925. The time would be 2:30 in the afternoon. And apparently there's some tickets still on sale. Ticket prices are 50 cents, $1.10, $2.20. And for those who can really splurge and want to go the extra mile, the top of line tickets are $2.75. And back then there was no StubHub, so it was only $2.75. Unlike today where you buy a ticket on StubHub for $100, and with their fees and everything, it's like $35,000 now. Back then it was $2.75. You came up with $2.75, of course, at $2.75, maybe some tax on there, but no Ticketmaster or StubHub got their greedy hands on anything. So the tickets, 50 cents, $1.10, $2.20, $2.75. The teams, the Providence Steamroller and the New York Giants. The place, the Polo Grounds. Now, this is a whatever you want to call, rematch of the Giants' first ever football game. First ever football game that the New York Giants had was on October 11th, Sunday, October 11th. They took a boat from New York and they went to Providence, Rhode Island on a boat trip. And it was not a very pleasant boat trip, shall we say. It was quite often, there was a few times it didn't seem like like it was like getting ready to, I guess, turn over. I guess some of the guys got sick. One of the guys was very drunk. Jim Thorpe and Bob Folwell. Actually, there's a picture I showed before. Let's see. We can find it in here again. Oh, there we go. Yeah, here we are. Speaking of the devil, there you go. Here's There's a picture. The upper picture up here. There's Jim Thorpe. He's playing solitaire, and Bob Folwell. I guess. See there, he always brought like that might be like his plays or something like that. He always had something like with him, like drawing up maybe plays or trying to figure stuff out or whatever. But that's on the boat trip the Giants took from, I guess, New York. They went to Rhode Island, and apparently what I was reading in this book here, good book, is that Jim Thorpe was one of the few who actually kind of, was kind of calm and everything. But so Jim Thorpe's there's playing solitaire on the Giants boat trip to go into their first ever game that he played against obviously the Providence Steamroller at the Cyclodrome, which was basically, it was a bicycle track. It only held like about 10,000 people. And some of because the way the bike track was, and they put the football field inside of it, like the corners of the end zone kind of got cut off because of the way the track was. So it was 100 yards long, but there was parts of the end zones were only, I think, like 5 yards deep or so, because some of them got cut off. Well, anyway, I mean, the Giants, they said, their first ever game that was against the Providence Steamroller was on Sunday, October 11th. The Giants would lose 14-0. The special teams in that game, that one particular game, actually the Giants' first two losses, special teams played a huge part in, but the Giants' first ever one was a block punt. Jim Thorpe tried to punt the ball, got blocked. I'm not sure if they scooped it up and ran into, fell into the end zone for a touchdown. Let's see. Yeah, block punt, recover in the end zone. Yeah, so Jim Thorpe tried to punt the ball. This happened all in the second quarter. And they punted the ball, got blocked, and they recovered in the end zone for a touchdown. So Providence was up 7-0. And apparently on the ensuing kickoff, because apparently it just seemed like while I was reading, like the rules is that the Giants had a kick off to the Providence. Usually nowadays, right? If you're punting the ball and you punt it and the other team blocks it and then recover it in the end zone for a touchdown, the other team scores a touchdown, right? So the other team's kicking off back to the Giants. Seemed like back then the way the rules were, the Giants were punting, got blocked, covered in the end zone for touchdown. The Giants apparently had to kick back off to them. So they tried to punt, blocked, and then they had to kick off to them. So then on the ensuing kickoff, they ran it back 92 yards. I saw 95 yards. I think I saw 96 yards. Whereas here it says on Pro Football References 92 yards for a touchdown. So special teams did the Giants in their first ever meeting against the Providence Steamroller. Providence scored 2 touchdowns in the second quarter, basically almost on back-to-back plays, it looked like. And the Providence Steamroller will go on to win 14-0. So the Giants in this game would wind up winning. We'll go over that in a little bit and get maybe a little bit of revenge, if you want to say. Because the Giants apparently, just reading in the book, didn't seem like they were in very good shape or good spirits or whatever after that boat trip to be playing the football game. But it is what it is. Let's see, the Giants, this would be their 8th game of the season. The Giants lost their first 3 games of the season. They lost Providence Steamroller. Then they lost back-to-back games to the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. Then the Giants win their next 4 games. Giants played how many did they play in a row? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They played their first 2 games on the road. They played their last game on the road. In between, they played 9 straight home games. Now, some of that also is, you can look at, well, that's kind of unfair. Why did all their games, well, a lot of it was because how they could kind of get away with it was, I'll imagine, was because they had the Polo Grounds, which was big. They could hold a lot of people. If they were going to the Cyclodrome all the time, all the people they can get there would be 10,000 people. That's all they could get. In the Polo Grounds, you can get 70,000 people there. Not that the Giants were going to get 70,000 people to see the Providence Steamroller go up against the New York Giants, but they could have gotten 15 or 20,000. And back then, an extra 5,000 paid attendance or an extra 10,000 paid attendance was absolutely huge back then. That's why a lot of the teams had to go under, because the financials, they didn't have enough money to pay their players. They didn't have enough money to pay to get good players. So that, so they had poor teams. And once you start getting poor teams, you get poor attendance. You get poor attendance, you get no money. You got no money, you can't play football. So you got to go bye-bye. So the Giants wind up playing a lot of their games at home, which, because, the Giants could, if they could get enough attendance, they could make some money. They could pay their ball players, but also they can make some money. But also they could have these other teams come in, and the other teams were like guaranteed like so much money to come and play. Right. So that's why I believe that the Giants wound up with a lot of home games. So the Giants, they lost their first 3, and then they won their next 4. So this one, they would win. This would be their 5th win in a row. They beat the Cleveland Bulldogs, the Buffalo Bisons, the Columbus Tigers, the Rochester Jeffersons, and this one here, the Providence Steamroller. So after the Giants won this one, they would go 5-3. Now the Providence Steamroller, this would be, I think, their 7th game, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, after they lost this game, they were 4-3. They started the season off, they lost to the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, so they started off 0-1. Then they won their next 2 games. They beat the Pottsville Maroons 6-0, and then they beat the Giants 14-0. Then they lost to the Pottsville Maroons 34-0. Let's see here. Then they beat the Rochester Jeffersons 17-0 to go 3-2. Then they beat the Buffalo Bisons 10-0 to go to 4-2. And then they would lose this game here against the New York Giants 13-12. So they would fall to 4-3, and the Giants went to 5-3. Now on let's see here. Do I have this here? I know I had it someplace. I guess we have to type it in. On the, here we go, 1925. All right. On the season here, we had, of course, the Chicago Cardinals would wind up winning the whole thing. They wind up with the best overall record, a record of 11-2-1. They would win the championship based on the best winning percentage. Now there were 20 teams. They had the best winning percentage out of all 20 teams. So the Chicago Cardinals, 1925 and 1947, the only 2 years the Cardinals won the championship. So Cardinals haven't won a championship since 1947. It's a long time, right? But let's see. So the Giants went up at the end of the season. They wound up 8-4. So they wound up tied with the Akron Pros. The Akron Pros were 4-2-2. The ties didn't count, so they were actually 4-2. So they wound up with a winning percentage of 667. The Giants were 8-4. Their winning percentage was 667. So the Giants wound up tied for fourth place. The Providence Steamroller wound up with a record of 6-5-1. So they wound up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They were 10th in 10th place. So they were not such a good team this year, but as we'll see here, in 1928, they'd be very, very good. Where are we at here? We got to get here we are. All right, the Providence Steamroller. And, it's kind of an interesting story. This is on Wikipedia. How they actually got their name is pretty interesting. It's just, kind of comical, shall we say. I'd say this here. The Providence Steamrollers, also referred to as the Providence Steamroller, the Providence Steamroller, Providence Steamroller, 2 words, the Providence Steamroller, 1 word, and the Providence Steamrollers were a professional American football team based in Providence, Rhode Island, in the National Football League. So the Giants' first ever football game, professional, one that actually counted, they played in Rhode Island. Go figure, right? They were in the National Football League, the Providence Steamroller, from 1925 to 1931. The Providence was the first New England team to win an NFL championship. The Steamroller won the league's championship in 1928, which is the latest NFL championship win by a defunct team to date. Because basically every team after that is still in existence. Because in 1929, 30, and 31 was the Green Bay Packers. 32 was the Bears. 33 was the Bears. 34 was the Giants. 35 was the Lions. 36, 36, I believe, was the Packers. 37 was the Redskins. 38 was the Giants, the Packers. So all those teams are still around. So 1928 was the last team to win a championship that's no longer around. Let's see here. Most of their home games were played in the 10,000-seat stadium that was built for bicycle races called the Cyclodrome. And if you ever put it in Wikipedia, it looks for bicycles. And actually, it was how bicycle races, they're not flat. I mean, they're like sloped around, going around the curves and all that. And it's just one long track, long oblong track, and the football field fit in there almost perfectly, but there wasn't a lot of extra room on the sidelines. And I said, and the way it was, if you ever look on Wikipedia, like the track cut off the corners of the end zone, back corners of the end zone. Let's see here. The Steamrollers were established in 1916 by members of the Providence Journal. The sports editor, Charles Coppin, and part-time sports writer Pierce Johnson. 3 men shared in the ownership and management of the team. Coppin, James Dooley, and Peter Laudaddy. Who's your daddy? Laudaddy, I guess. Meanwhile, Johnson stayed on as the team's manager for each of the teams' their existence. So, I mean, he was their team. He was their manager for quite a few years. I mean, you look at it like, how long they were in existence for. But then you look at the Giants. I mean, from 1925 to 1931, they had they had Bob Folwell, then they had Doc Alexander, then they had Earl Pottinger, then they had Leroy Andrews, then they had Benny Friedman, then they had Steve Owens. So from 25 to 31, they had like 6 different coaches. Benny Friedman was he coached the final two games of the 1930, two or three games. I think it was the last 2 games in the 1930s. See, he was like an interim coach, but the Giants had like 6 coaches in like 6 years. right? Unlike the Providence Steamroller, who had the same coach every year. The team soon became a regional power, and by the mid-1920s was known as the best independent team in the country. By 1919, the team was drawing in more spectators than Brown University by a margin of 2-1, according to newspaper reports at the time. Now, back then, college football was huge. I was looking at articles, and I think it was between Princeton and Yale. There was a game played about a week before this game got played in the Yale Bowl in Connecticut. It was over 70, it might have been 78,000 people were there to watch Princeton versus Yale. Meanwhile, the New York Giants could only get like 10,000 people to a game. So college football was huge back then. Let's see how. However, it seemed unlikely since the Steamrollers crowd was on average of 3,000 spectators a game. The players' wages were lower than those of Indiana and Ohio, so it was harder for the Steamrollers to bring in ringers. Several college football players did play for the Steamrollers, but under aliases. I'm sorry. So as to not jeopardize their amateur status, because they couldn't be an amateur and play college and get paid as a pro. So so they had to go under assumed names, which would nowadays would never happen. Could never happen. They couldn't get away with it. But back then they could play under like an alias name, right? And then go back and play football for their school. Of course, if they ever played for the Providence Steamroller and they got paid and say they broke a leg, they can't go back and play college football. So it is what it is. Let's see. 1924 Providence schedule featured several NFL teams. The Steamrollers posted a 3-2-1 record against those NFL teams. Remember, 1924 Providence was still not in the NFL yet. They defeated the Rochester Jeffersons 3-0, the Minneapolis Marines 49-0, and the Dayton Triangles 10-7. Both of their losses came against the Frankford Yellow Jackets, 21-10 and 16-3. The team also posted a scoreless tie against the Columbus Tigers. In 1924, Steamrollers then went on to win the mythical undisputed championship of the Northeast as an independent team. The team's success that season was enough to make Steamrollers management and fans start thinking about playing in the NFL. Ooh. The NFL years. Providence joined the NFL in time for the 1925 season, which is basically they came in 1925. Hey, so did the New York Giants, 1925. By that time, the only three players from the 1924 team was still in the lineup when the team's first practice in 1925 was held on September 17th. There was only three players left. There was a lot of turnover, and same thing with the Giants. There was usually every year there was a lot of turnover. You think there's turnover now? It seemed like I think there was even more turnover back then. In fact, only about a dozen of them wore Steamroller colors for the team's debut in the NFL. The Steamrollers had played mediocre football in their first two NFL seasons, but posted a strong 8-5-1 record in 1927. So they were strong in 1927. However, the New York Giants were even stronger. The New York Giants were 11-1-1, and the New York Giants won the championship in 1927. In 1928, the Providence Steamroller would be the champions. Let's see here. They had an 8-5-1 record in 1927 with Jim Konzelman as the team's head coach. For his per-game salary of $292, Konzelman not only coached the team, but also played quarterback in the single-wing formation. The star player for Providence was halfback George Wildcat Wilson, a 1925 All-American from the University of Washington who had spent the 1926 season as the head of the traveling Los Angeles Wildcats of the AFL. The AFL that only lasted one season back in 1926. It was a league that got formed to try to rival the NFL, but due to money matters, it only lasted. I don't even think it even lasted the whole season, to be truth. I think all the teams went under. The 1928 championship season. Providence opened the 1928 season against Red Grange and the New York Yankees, Wilson's rival from the AFL. Red Grange was in the AFL for that one season in 1926. The Steamrollers led the Yankees 27 at halftime and held that score throughout the second half. However, the team's next game resulted in a 10-6 loss to the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. They had a hard time beating the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. However, the team soon rebounded with a 4-game winning streak over the Dayton Triangles, 28-0, the Yankees 12-6, the Pottsville Maroons 13-6, and the Detroit Wolverines 7-0. The Steamrollers faced the Yellow Jackets again in Frankfurt Stadium on November 17th, which resulted in a scoreless tie. However, a week later at the Cyclodrome, Providence finally avenged its only loss of the season with a 6-0 victory over the Yellow Jackets. The team would then post wins over the New York Giants 16-0 and Pottsville 7-0 before ending its season with a 7-7 tie against the Green Bay Packers. Providence was named the 1928 NFL champions. Prior to the 1932 season, the NFL team with the best winning percentage was named the NFL champions. So despite the Yellow Jackets winning 3 more games than the Steamrollers and posting an 11-3-2 record, Providence was awarded the title due to having a better winning percentage. Now, the Providence Steamroller were 8-1-2. Their winning percentage was .889. The Frankfurt Yellow Jackets were 11-3-2, but their winning, because with the 3 losses, their winning percentage was .786. So the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets wound up in second place, and the Providence Steamroller would be declared the winner for the 1928 season. A victory banquet at the Biltmore Hotel took place a week later. At the banquet, each player was rewarded with a gold watch. Wow. It was also at this event that Konzelman was given a trophy and named the team's most valuable player. 5 of the Steamrollers players gained all NFL honors when the league issued its official honor roll on December 23rd. Wildcat Wilson and Clyde Smith were named to the first team, while Curly Oden, Milt Reinquist, and Gus Sonnenberg were placed on the second team. NFL first. It's got some interesting stuff here. Over the course of the next 7 years, the team not only won an NFL championship, but also established 3 league firsts. In 1925, Providence was the first NFL team to play its home games in a bicycle racing stadium, the Cyclodrome. Right? In 1929, the Steamrollers established 2 NFL firsts in a 6. This is freaking crazy. Now, if you think about guys complaining nowadays about the schedule, check this out. In a 6-day period between November 5th and November 10th, 1929, Providence played 4 games. And not only did they play 4 games in 6 days, the guys on the field had to play offense and defense. Now, you got guys nowadays, and I get it, you want to get paid, I get it, all that. But these guys here nowadays, they play maybe 40, 50 plays a game or so. They want to make millions and trillions of dollars and all of that. You know what I mean? Well, the guys back then might have been making like $100 a game. They got to play 60 minutes, and they're playing 4 games in 6 days. I mean, absolutely freaking crazy. Absolutely crazy. Let's see. The marathon string began against the Staten Island Stapletons, the Chicago Cardinals, and concluded with a 2-game series against the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. Although the Steamrollers made history, their 0-3-1 record during a 6-day stretch proved to be a scheduling disaster. During the second game of that 4-game series, Providence hosted the Cardinals on November 6th. There we go. The game was played at night at nearby Kinsley Park, where floodlights recently had been installed. The teams had originally been scheduled to play on Sunday, November 3rd, but heavy rains made the Cyclodrome field unplayable. Because remember, back then, the fields had no drainage. So if it rained, it puddled up, and the puddles just stayed. And it became mud and quagmires and all, you know what I mean? So, since neither team wanted to lose a payday, which was huge, absolutely huge back then, the historic night game was hastily scheduled. Because of this, Providence made history again by being the first team to host an NFL game at night under the floodlights. Although the Steamrollers lost 16-0, the game was declared a success because 6,000 fans attended. And back then, 6,000, especially if they were all paid. Now, I mean, obviously there were other games that had a lot more fans, but 6,000, wasn't too bad, especially if they were all paid. Now, the decline of the Providence Steamroller. Despite their 1928 championship, the team experienced troubles in 1929. On January 4th, 1929, Sonnenberg defeated Strangler Lewis in 2 straight falls to capture the World Heavyweight Championship in professional wrestling. I wonder how fake it was back then. This caused Sonnenberg to stay out of football as he could make better money defending his title in wrestling. Right? If you know you could wrestle, and you could wrestle every day, you can't play football, 60 minutes of football every day. I mean, it was dangerous back then. It was dangerous back then, as we're going to find out. We're going to find out. I'm going to read a little excerpt in this book here. It could be dangerous, really dangerous. So they're one of their players, Sonnenberg, was out of football. Meanwhile, Odin quit pro football to take a job with an insurance company in Boston, and Smith decided to return to his native Missouri and coach football. Konzelman also didn't fully recover from a knee injury sustained in 1928. Reinquist missed the first half of the season due to illness. Wow, must have been a heck of an illness. And Wildcat Wilson became complacent and turned into an ordinary back. The 1929 Steamrollers team struggled to a 4-6-2 record, resulting in a 7th place finish. This caused the fans who attended each game during the championship season to stay home. The team posted a 6-4-1 record in 1930 and a 4-4-3 record in 1931. The lack of interest, coupled with the Great Depression in 1930, caused Dooley, Coppin, and Laudati. Who's your daddy? Laudati. 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 To suspend operations after the 1931 season. The 3 owners then gave up and turned the franchise back over to the NFL in 1933. Now, this is interesting here. One of the owners. This is the origin of the team's name, the name origin, right, of the Steamroller. During halftime, against a game between the Steamrollers, I guess at the time maybe they weren't called the Steamrollers. I'm not sure. But it says during a halftime game between the Steamrollers and the Providence Pros, Charles Coppin, who was getting a hot dog. So Charles Coppin was one of the owners. Okay, so there must have been before they were named the Steamrollers. So one of the owners, they were, let's see, what would they call? Would they call it something else? Team history, Providence-based league, independent. I don't know. But I mean, I guess they couldn't have been called this. Maybe the Steamroller the whole time. I'm not exactly sure. But their owner, right, was getting a hot dog, and he heard a remark from the opposing team that somebody said that the opposing team was getting steamrolled, meaning they were getting killed. They were getting annihilated. Just like the way the Giants were, like in the opening game against the Cowboys. They got steamrolled 40-0. So he heard the other team's getting steamrolled. He's like, wow, that's a pretty cool name. I like that. So he took that name, and the Providence, they became the Steamrollers. Sometimes it's called the Steamrollers. Sometimes you see the Steamroller. It is what it is. Coppin loved the remark so much, he named this team the Steamrollers. So there were other Steamroller teams. A team known as the Providence Huskies, the Steamroller had used a husky-like dog as their mascot. So this team may have been a continuation or a successor to the Steamroller, played during the 1933 season. The Huskies earned a perfect season, the only season in the professional or semi-professional record books. Interesting. This is interesting too. The Providence Huskies earned a perfect season, the only season in professional or semi-professional record books to have not allowed their opponents to score a single point over the entire season. Every game they played was a shutout victory every game. In 1936, an unrelated Providence Steamroller team played the New England in the New England Football League for one season. The Steamroller was revived by Pierce Johnson, one of the original team's founders. The subsequent Steamrollers played on a near continuous basis since that point as a semi-pro minor league and independent team until 1942, when it moved to Springfield and became the Springfield Steamroller for 1943 and suspended operations shortly thereafter. The last 3 seasons of a Providence Steamrollers team were as a member of the Atlantic Coast Football League. In 1962, the Steamroller team was the league's runner-up, losing in the championship to the Patterson Miners in a double overtime decision. The assets of the ACFL Steamroller were bought and taken to the Continental Football League as the Rhode Island Indians, where the team played one last season in 1965. After the 1965 season, the team's franchise rights were turned over to the famed baseball player Jackie Robinson, check that out, and became the Brooklyn Dodgers, which lasted one season. A Basketball Association America franchise was also called the Providence Steamrollers. The Steamrollers played 3 seasons beginning in 1946 and 3 seasons beginning in 1946 and 47 that season. The name was revived again in 1988 for an Arena Football League team, the New England Steamrollers. A rare home movie showing the Providence Steamrollers playing the Framingham Lion Tamers was recently discovered and presented by Northeast Historic Film, a regional movie image archived in New England. Wow. Very, very interesting. Now, they also have, let's see, Providence Steamroller Hall of Famers players, Pro Football Hall of Famers. Jim Conzelman was the coach. He was a halfback and a quarterback and a coach. He was inducted in 1964. And Fritz Pollard, a halfback in 1925, he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2005. Now, the Providence Steamrollers, season by season, 1924, the season before they came into the NFL, they were 12-3-1, which is like, and they played very well against NFL teams. So that's when they were thinking, hey, we can go up against the NFL teams. Let's, so they were able to join the NFL. 1925, they were 6-5-1. 1926, they were 5-7-1. 1927, they were 8-5-1. So they were in 5th place. 1928, that's when their year. They were 8-1-2. They finished in 1st place. Then they went 1929, they were 4-6-2. They fell to 8th place. 1930, they were 6-4-1. They fell to 5th. And in 1931, their final season, they were 4-4-3, and they fell to 6th place. And that was I said, one of the just a huge problem back then. It was especially one of the biggest things was the Depression. Because it was hard enough back in the 20s to get people to pay money to come see a professional football game. I remember, like, even horse racing was big back then. Horse racing, college football, boxing, baseball, they were huge back then. It was really difficult for the NFL, and that's why a lot of times, and I'll pop this up here too. I do apologize, you can't see this, but stuff like this happened. The Giants played, which is going to be the Giants' next game. They play. I love this. This is why I love this stuff back then. They played the first time they ever played the Cowboys. Okay, was on November 22nd, 1925. They played the Kansas City Cowboys, and unlike today, right? Unlike today, where the Dallas Cowboys have beaten the Giants like the past 342,000 games in a row. The Giants actually beat the Cowboys back then, 9-3. It's obviously they're not the same team, but so the Giants actually played the Cowboys. But that was a regular season game. Then 4 days later, they played the Stapleton Collegians. It was an exhibition game at Thompson Stadium. Exhibition game. They play in an exhibition game during a regular season. That would be like the Giants nowadays, right? Losing to the San Francisco 49ers, and 3 days later they're playing the Buffalo Collegians or something like that, just as an exhibition game, right? That don't happen nowadays, right? And even after this season was over, the Giants played a bunch of exhibition games. I'm going to try to see if I can find some of these stuff, some articles and stuff about this, and do videos about some. They did exhibition games in January. The season ended on December 13th, but they played at least 3 games in January. They were exhibition games. Why? Well, to try to make some money. As I said, because it was huge back then. It's not like it is nowadays, right? It's not like with television rights. Every team gets so much money, right? Every team probably gets whatever. I don't know. I was going to say $300 million. Just throwing a number out there. I have no idea. But out of that $300 million, you got to spend so much for your salary, right? So I mean, say the teams are spending 230. So maybe each team makes 70 just on the TV. Right. And of course, then you got whatever. Then you got, jersey sales and all this other stuff. It wasn't like that back then. I mean, back then, to get people into the stadium, Tim Mara, the owner of the Giants back then, sometimes he's giving away like 5,000 free seats just to get people in there to try to drum up some interest. You figure if you can give away some free seats and people, this is pretty cool. I like this. This is pretty nice. Hey, pro football's got a, it's got a place. I like this. So then they maybe start coming out in the future and they would start paying. But that wasn't the case. And I said, and then that was in the 20s, and sometimes you had some teams that weren't very good. I mean, who's going to pay, back then who's going to pay $1 for a ticket back then? I mean, back then that was a lot of money. And to see 2 teams play who stink, ain't nobody doing that. Of course, then you get into the early 30s and the Depression came around and then nobody had any money. Well, how you supposed to go to pay money to go to a football game if you ain't got no money, right? So it was very difficult, especially on a lot of the smaller independent teams. It was so difficult. That's why with Tim Mara, he had a huge advantage being in New York City. Because with so many people there, he's not asking for the whole city to show up to the football game. Just give me a few thousand. No, he wants more than a few thousand. Give me 5,000 or 10,000 people, and maybe I can make some money out of this. But it wasn't like that. I mean, I said a lot of these other teams had small stadiums like the Cyclodrome. They can only put 10,000 people in there. That's all. So it was very, very difficult. Very, very difficult. But this game wound up being pretty interesting. It was a very tough one too. Very tough one, right? So I got my book here. A couple books I got, but I like this one. This one goes over. This book here is only if you're an old fart like me and you like the old time stuff. I love the old time stuff here. This I absolutely love this. I can read this stuff all. So I'm an old fart. I got nothing better to do in my life, right? But this book here kind of goes over season by season. It's like 8, 9, 10 pages over each season. So it's pretty cool. See, stuff like this you don't find like in the newspaper articles, right? Which I'm going to read into you in just a minute here. But just before this game, prior to this game, the Giants made an offer to Red Grange to see if he can come out, because what he was doing, he played for Illinois, and his college football season was coming to an end, and he couldn't play college football and pro football at the same time. So his college football season came to an end. And I think once he came to an end, he would be able to play like 4 games, maybe 5 games or so in the pros and make some money. And he made some money. Let me tell you what, he got a certain amount of the gate money. I mean, he was that much of a draw. Let me tell you what, he was like Michael Jackson back then. Let me tell you what, people wanted to see him play. Holy cow, was he popular back then. But the Giants made an offer to him to try to get him in, because they knew if they could get him there, he could pack the stadium, which he did in a later game in this season, 1925, which I'm going to go over in one of my videos probably in whatever, a week or 2 from now. The Bears came to town with Red Grange, and the place, Polo Grounds, was freaking packed. There was mob people come climbing and over the fence just to see him. It was absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. But they made an offer to him to try to get him in, but he wound up signing with the Bears, unfortunately, because he would have been phenomenal in New York. The Giants could have gotten him. I mean, he was a real good player, but he would have been a heck of a draw. I mean, as far as fans, would have sold the place out almost probably every game. Let's see here. So the Giants continued to win during shutting out the Rochester Jeffersons 13-0, which was the game that they just played prior to this one. Let's see here. Okay. Then they gained a revenge over the Providence Steamroller, who they lost to in the first game of the season, 14-0. So they gained some revenge over them by winning 13-12, but lost 10 men due to injuries. 10. Now, when you figure they only had like 20 guys, 19, 20 guys, I forgot what it was on a roster. They only had to have like 19 to 20 guys on a roster. They lost 10 guys. They lost basically half their team due to injuries. Let's see here. Hendrian, who had lost 4 front teeth in an earlier game, was the most seriously injured. So in a prior game, he lost 4 teeth, right? He suffered a cracked rib in this game. Hinky Haynes, now his nose was hidden behind a leather mask because against the Columbus Tigers, he broke his nose. I heard either he got tackled and his face got smashed into the mud because it was a muddy game, or I also read somebody hit him with a flying elbow and broke his nose. So he missed the Rochester Jefferson game. But then he came back for this game. He had like a leather helmet on with the. I have a picture of it. I know I saw a picture of it someplace. No, it's not in here. There was another picture of it. Not in here though, unfortunately. But yeah, he has something over his nose. It's a piece of leather over his nose, which is attached to the helmet to try to protect him. So let's see here. Haynes, his nose hidden helmet behind a leather mask, saved the victory with a brilliant piece of strategy in the final minutes. This is, but it also goes to show you how the rules were back then. This is interesting. The Giants were leading 13-10 right at the end of the game, with 4th down on his own 5-yard line. Hinky Haynes did not want to give the Steamrollers another chance to score a touchdown or kick a field goal. And it's just weird because like back then, a lot of times teams got down inside like around the 10-yard line or so, or inside the 10, and they would just try for touchdowns. It's like instead of trying to kick a field goal. But it is what it is. Okay. So he dropped back into punt formation, right? Instead of kicking the ball, now this is just the rules were different back then. Weird. Not like this nowadays, right? He touched the ball down in the end zone for a 2-point safety. So now they're winning 13-12. With the score now 13-12, the Giants ran out the clock without ever relinquishing the ball. So what happened? Weird, right? He touched it down. And in one of these articles I'm going to read in a second, the Giants kept the ball. They moved it out to their own 30. So they gave them 2 points, but the Giants got the ball, moved out to their own 30-yard line, and they kept the ball, and they were able to run the clock out. Because usually nowadays you touch it down in the end zone, right? So instead of kicking out of his end zone, maybe now we get the free kick from the 20, right? So you can free kick it. And they catch it at their 20 or whatever, and they run it back, and maybe they get out to the 30, 35-yard line or so, whatever. No, nowadays, back then, if you touched it down the end zone, they kept the ball. But you give the other team 2 points. I mean, nowadays, you give the other team 2 points and you give them the ball. So things were definitely different back then. Definitely different back then. All right, let's see here. Let's get to the game here, shall we? All right, here we go. All right. Giants nose out Providence 13-12. Hinky Haynes, intentional safety in the final minute, throttles the Steamrollers. The Giants' 5th straight win. Remember, I said they beat the Cleveland Bulldogs. for their first ever win. They won 19-0. That's the first ever win. Hinkie Haynes scored the first 2 touchdowns in Giant history, right? They beat the Cleveland Bulldogs 19-0. They beat the Buffalo Bisons. They beat the Columbus Tigers. Then they beat the Rochester Jeffersons. Now they beat the Providence Steamrollers. So they're 5 straight wins. After this, they're 5-3. The Invaders come from behind in the final period to score 9 points, 20,000 to 10. I'm not sure where they got 9 points from because they had 10 points. I'm not sure, but okay. So 20,000 were in attendance. Now, out of the 20,000, you don't know. Tim Maurer used to give away tickets, so you don't know how many people actually paid. The New York Football Giants rolled up an early lead on the Providence Steamrollers, and obviously this is one of those interesting games where the Providence Steamrollers scored every way possible. They scored a touchdown, they kicked an extra point, they kicked the field goal, and they got a safety. They scored all 4 different ways. Giants had an early lead on the Providence Steamrollers at the Polo Grounds yesterday, throttled the visiting machine until the 4th quarter, and then with the New England 11, finally got up the steam till local football pros were smart enough to hold on to the ball in the final minute by Haynes' intentional safety until the whistle blew. The final score was 13-12, and it was the 5th successive victory for the Giants. They have won in their mad march toward the top of the National Football League. With a perfect football day beckoning the sportsmen outdoors, which this is usually odd because usually it seemed like a lot of the games it was like pouring rain or there was always some kind of bad weather going on. But apparently this particular day, it was very nice in New York City. 20,000 made their way to the Polo Grounds and were treated to one of the finest, most interesting, and thrilling games of the local professional season. Now, also, because let's not forget, the first 4 games, the first 5 games, where we at here, at the Polo Grounds were all shutouts. The first 5, this is the first game where both teams scored. The first game, the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets came to town. They won 14-0. Then the Giants beat the Bulldogs 19-0. Then they beat the Bison 7-0. Then they beat the Columbus Tigers 19-0. Then they beat the Rochester Jeffersons 13-0. The first 5 games the Giants played at home against the Polo Grounds were all shutouts. They were 4-1. They got shut out the first time against the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. So this is the first game. Took 6 games at the Polo Grounds for the Giants, the home game, where actually both teams actually scored points. And 13-12, you ain't getting much closer than that. Let me tell you what. Let's see here. The Steamrollers gathered their points in every possible way a team can score on a gridiron, but their touchdown, point after touchdown, field goal, and safety didn't quite add up to the points accumulated by the Giants through 2 touchdowns and an extra point. Apparently, they missed another extra point. In the first quarter, the New York Stars marched 56 yards to the Providence's 18-yard line, and after being turned back momentarily, they started all over again and went 36 yards to the first touchdown of the game as a pass from McBride to Bomar covering the last 24 yards. Then Laird boots goal from field. I love the way they explain this stuff. In the next quarter, however, Joe Laird, former Colgate star, stood on the Giants' 35-yard line and sent a placement goal squarely between the posts for 3 points, and the Steamrollers were decidedly in the running again. In the third quarter, the Giants increased their lead by a long march. So I guess it was, let's see here. Where are we at here? Just want to see if they, let's see where box score. Here we go. I'm trying to see if the Giants made their extra point here or not. Yeah, they did. Okay. Yeah. So the Giants, they Jack McBride kicked the extra point. So the Giants were up 7-0. Then Jim Laird kicked the 35-yard field goal to make it 7-3. So it was 7-3 at halftime. All right. In the third quarter, the Giants increased their lead by a long march of 80 yards that was never halted until McBride plunged over the last white chalk mark for another New York touchdown. But the Steamrollers got up steam in the last period, and so apparently the extra point was missed, so it was 13-3 after that touchdown. But the Steamrollers got up steam in the last period and duplicated that feat with an 80-yard march, more than half of which was covered with one long heave from Maloney to McIntosh. Laird went over for the touchdown, and when he kicked the goal, the score stood at 13-10, with the Steamrollers rolling merrily along. I love it. A field goal would tie the score, and a touchdown will win it for the visitors. But after an exchange of punts and several wasted minutes in between, darkness began to descend on the field, and with only a minute left to play, the Giants found themselves in possession of the ball on their own 5-yard line. Right? Where they decided they would guard and protect their slim advantage until the referee's final whistle and divert possible disaster. So they were just trying to run out the clock. But the game didn't end, so they had to punt. So Haynes adopts the safety route. 3 plays through the line failed to advance the ball out of danger, and still the whistle didn't sound for the end of the game. It appeared as if Providence would get its hands on the ball for one more try after all. But Hinkie Haynes decided otherwise. He dropped back behind his own goal line. Now remember, he had his nose broken, so he has a leather helmet on with a leather piece over his nose. And he looked like he looked like a bird. He had like a beak, right? And he looking out. I mean, it was really. If you ever see the picture of it, it's rather kind of comical. But that's what he had to do. He's trying to protect his nose. I'm not sure what kind of protection a piece of leather would give his nose, but that's what he was dealing with. So Hinkie Haynes dropped back behind his own goal line on a kick formation to punt the ball. But instead of kicking it, he touched the ball down in the end zone for a safety to give Providence 2 points. Now it's 13-12. And they're kind of hoping the clock is going to run out, but it didn't. So the safety gave Providence 2 points, but it also left the Giants in possession of the ball on the 30-yard line. So he touched it down and gave them 2 points, but the Giants kept the ball and they moved it out to the 30-yard line. So then the Giants were able to run the clock out. Let's see. So the Giants had the ball at their own 30-yard line. First down, and with still a lead of one at their own 30-yard line and a fresh set of downs, right? And still with a 1-point lead. 3 more plays, and the game was over without Providence ever getting its hands on the ball during the last few minutes. So Hinkie Haynes, good old Hinkie Haynes, huh? Thinking, right? So the Giants got a safety, gave the Providence 2 points, but they kept control of the ball, moved out to the 30-yard line, and the Giants were able to run the clock out and get their 5th consecutive victory. Let's see, New York. Let's see. Jappy was their left end. Milstead was their left tackle. Tomlin was their left guard. Doc Alexander was their center, who would become the Giants coach in 1926. Williams was the right guard. Parnell was the right tackle. Bomar was the right end. Hendrian was the quarterback. Brennan was the left halfback. Benkert was the right halfback. And McBride was the fullback. All right, let's see. Providence. Galbeski was the left end. Kozlowski was the left tackle. Scher was the left guard. Eckstein was the center. Young was the right guard. Golian was the right tackle. Maloney was the right end. Odin was the quarterback. Wentworth was the left halfback. McIntosh was the right halfback, and Laird was the fullback. Now substitutions, what do we have? Haynes didn't start the game, Hinkie Haynes, but he wound up being a substitute. So the Giants had, let's see, they 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Looks like they had 7 substitutes. Looks like Hinkie Haynes was kind of going in and out of a lineup, so quite a few times. So the Giants actually substituted 7 times So that's quite a bit so far for what I'm seeing from reading these games and everything like that. So 7 substitutes in one game was quite a bit back then. So the Giants had 7. Providence had 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like they had 4 substitutes, which seems more about normal. So the Giants scored in the first quarter. Providence scored in the second quarter. The Giants scored a touchdown in the third to make it 13-3. Providence scored touchdown, kicked the extra point to make it 13-10. And then with about a minute or so to go in the game, they got their safety to make it final score 13-12. Very, very interesting. All right, so I got one more here for you. It says the Grid Giants in stirring victory, 13-12. 2 touchdowns and brain work beat Providence. After waiting for fully a month to avenge an earlier season defeat, those highly geared, smooth-working Giants hit back at the Providence Steamrollers yesterday at the Polo Grounds and won a sensational battle, 13-12. It was the 5th straight triumph for Bob Folwell, the coach of the Giants, professional Warriors. Under ideal conditions, close to 22,000 fans turned out. Now, I mean, you got close to 22,000 here. The other article said like 20,000. Right. And once again, whether it was 20 or 22, you're not exactly sure how many of those were actually paid. Because I said Tim Mara was giving out free tickets. He could have easily been 5, 6, 7,000 free tickets he gave out just to try to get some interest. The Giants led from the start to finish. They scored 2 touchdowns. Lynn Bomar carried the ball over in the first period and Jack McBride in the third. It says the visitors scored in practically every possible manner. They did score in every possible manner. Laird booted a field goal from the 35-yard mark for the first 3 points to make the score 7-3 in the second quarter. He went over for the visitors' only touchdown in the final period and also booted the extra point. Just a real athlete, this man Laird. Then, with the score 13-10 in their favor, and with the enemy camping on their own 5-yard line during the last few minutes of play, the Giants' board of strategy had Hinkie Haynes make a deliberate safety. This gave the visitors 2 points, but it put the ball back on the 30-yard line where it was safe. Giants offensive straight line plunging by McBride and Heine Benkert netted 5 consecutive first downs early in the first period and carried the locals to the Providence 20-yard line. Here, McBride heaved a short pass to Bomar, who sliced over the line for the first touchdown, carrying 3 tackles with him. Wow. Laird shortened the gap with his field goal. After this, Hinkie Haynes' brilliant back checked off a spectacular end run for 50 yards in the second period. 5 straight first downs, a pass from McBride to Rooney, and McBride line plunge brought the Giants' second score. McBride's try for the extra point was blocked, so that's why he missed it. That's why it was only 13-3 at that particular point instead of 14-3 because it got blocked. McIntosh's 60-yard run paved the way for Laird's touchdown in the final period. Let's see, is there something up over here? Nope. That was pretty much about it. So the McIntosh had a 60-yard run, which paved the way for the Providence Steamrollers touchdown, their lone touchdown in the fourth period. So it wound up being a very, very exciting game. Very, very exciting game. The Giants, wind up prevailing this one, 13-12. As I said, this was the first game. This wound up being actually the 6th game at the Polo Grounds. The first 5 games were all shutouts. Everyone, this was the first game ever that both teams, the Providence Steamroller on November 15th, 1925, were actually both teams scored 13-12, and actually came down to the final seconds. And good old Hinkie Haynes, remember that name? Hinkie Haynes, smart thinking, touched the ball down for a safety, which might have helped the Giants win this football game. So, all right, well, that pretty much wraps up. So that's what happened on this date, right? November 15th, 1925, in New York football Giants history. I'll see you next time.